Welcome back to Veronica Live. And I'm here with a regular to Veronica Live, Keith Gross. He is a conservative activist, attorney, pilot, recently ran for U.S. Senate here in Florida. Keith, welcome back to Veronica Live.
Good to be with you.
Well, you are passionate about the deficit, and we are at $37 billion. And it seems like we're going to be discussing, a continuing resolution again. But I'm not seeing much news on that because we've had so much, other news in the news cycle that people really aren't talking about this. But I'm concerned because Speaker Johnson needs to rally these people because we keep kicking this can down the road, Keith. How are you seeing all of this?
This is how it goes every time. We don't see any news about it until 2 days before there's a government shutdown. But there's been 9 months where President Trump's been in office and we've had a Republican majority in Congress. They've had 9 months to get real progress done on a budget, but there's always some shiny new thing to look at instead of having Congress do their actual job. That's why the deficit keeps going up. That's why our national debt keeps going up. And there seems to be no end in sight to this. Congress, our Republican majority, is about to rubber stamp an extension of Biden's spending programs because they couldn't find time in the last 9 months to codify President Trump's spending priorities.
Well, what can I do? I don't know what to do because these people always go on vacation, and then I'm more always worried that the government employees aren't going to get their paycheck. When is enough enough? Because especially the Republicans, I feel like we are the adults in the room. Why can't we change this, or is it really the deficit? Nobody cares.
I think it's a situation where incumbents know they're likely not to get fired because by the time election season rolls around, everyone's going to forget that they failed to do their job because it's become normal that they fail to do their job. It's not even something that makes the news anymore, as you pointed out. So until voters get serious and get to the point that they're willing to fire incumbents who can't pass a budget, this is going to continue. Why wouldn't it? There's no consequence.
Very true. Okay. Well, I know you've been passionate about Arena that was killed in North Carolina by the criminal that had been arrested, 14 times and let out of prison. And now we have Charlie Kirk that has been assassinated. What can we do to stop this crime? And now yesterday I was watching Patel from the FBI talking. There's fringe groups out there and the left keeps saying that it's they're not criminals, they don't hurt people, but most of what's gone down has been from their side.
Recently, there's been a clear pattern that the left sides with criminals. Democrat judges in Democrat cities continue to let criminals out of jail, often with no bail, even when they've been arrested over a dozen times, like the murderer on the train in Charlotte. These clear patterns of violence should have real consequences, but they don't because people aren't rising up and complaining about this loudly enough until quite recently. So let's hope that the current cry for justice remains long enough to make a real impact and that we don't go back to the way things were, where judges turn these people loose. Even with the killer on the train in Charlotte, that guy has already been declared potentially unfit for trial due to mental health reasons and transferred to a mental health facility. We've got to get to the point in America where if someone is not competent to behave themselves in society when they're so mentally ill that they're a violent threat, that they're not allowed to walk around on our streets. That shouldn't be an excuse.
So, have you been happy with what's gone down in DC? And it looks like, we've got the National Guard there. We're cleaning up crime. We've got some other cities, in our crosshairs now, New Orleans. I keep hoping we're going to go to Chicago stand, as I call it, next as well. The left has just been losing it. But I think even for these, the poor people that live in these cities, it's nice to clean up these, get rid of crime and handle it for once.
Yeah, I mean, Americans deserve the right to walk around their cities and streets without fear that someone who has a criminal history is going to engage in additional violence against them. We also have the right to carry firearms for our self-defense, something that the folks on the train in Charlotte were deprived of. I'm not sure if you know this, but even if you have a North Carolina concealed carry permit, the city of Charlotte transit system will not allow you to carry. it would be a crime for you to have a firearm for your self-defense on that train. And so it's a combination of things. I mean, you've pointed out the progress made in DC, which is fantastic progress. DC is safer now than it has been probably my entire lifetime. So it's really great to see Trump taking crime seriously, but it's got to be more of a systemic improvement. Donald Trump can't solve this by himself. We need prosecutors who are willing to enforce the law, judges who are willing to imprison dangerous people, and citizens who continue to put the pressure on our government to do the right thing.
Well, and we just had Charlie Kirk killed last week, which was horrific because he was it was words he was saying and everything he said I agreed with. And we've got Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who's never really assimilated in the United States, has been saying horrible things. And of course, Congressman Nancy Mace is on fire to kick her out of all of her committees and start to clean up Congress. Is she doing the right thing, Congressman Mace? Because I just feel like Ileana has gotten a pass, and she's never been Trump team, and she always says that how she's so Somali and doesn't fight for America.
You know, the thing about free speech is our First Amendment right does cover horrible, terrible statements. The offensive statements uttered by Ilhan Omar, those are protected free speech statements. But just because you won't be prosecuted for saying horrible things doesn't mean that society needs to agree with you or accept those positions. So, having Mace push back the other way is important because what that does is it sends the message that these positions are not acceptable positions in society. These are not reasonable values that correspond with what Americans believe in. So there can be consequences for what you say. You have the right to say it, not the right to be free of consequences.
Well, I really hope she is censured because she just does what she wants to do, and it's never an America First agenda. So you were in Tallahassee and you spoke to the Capitol Conservative Club. So what message did you bring to them? Because when you ran for office, you fought so hard for everything America First and President Trump. What message did you deliver?
Well, as you know, I mean, I'm a constitutional conservative. That's really my core. So we talked a lot about constitutional values and how those values are being implemented and where we have room for improvement. We talked about property taxes and how the takings clause already should prohibit you from losing your property without due process. How our founders believed in the idea of a natural right to private property ownership, that when you mix your labor with the fruits of nature, you should own that. Federalist 54, James Madison went into great detail about that idea of private property ownership. And it was really the foundation of our capitalist system as compared with the communist systems in other parts of the world where private property ownership was expressly unavailable to people. So if we believe in private property ownership, why doesn't that automatically mean that property taxes are an unreasonable taking? Because what happens if you don't pay your property taxes? The government takes your property from you. So even if you own your house outright, you still have to pay rent to the government. That's in conflict with our ideology of private property ownership. Once you own it, it's supposed to be yours. We talked a lot about that. The Capitol Conservatives Club in Tallahassee, it is a group of fired up, engaged patriots who are really into the policy discussions of the day. So it was nice to talk about that and a variety of issues with them last night.
And what about open carry? Because we've got a lot of changing here in Florida. What are your thoughts on open carry here in Florida, Keith? Because I know you love the Second Amendment.
I do. I've fought for that for a long time, and I've looked for ways to help expand that. I've talked about it a lot at many speeches. Florida still has some laws on the books which infringe our Second Amendment right. Adults aged 18 to 20 are still prohibited from purchasing a firearm in the state of Florida. That is a completely unconstitutional law. Law abiding citizens, without due process, without even knowing that it's happened, could be subject to a red flag gun confiscation order under a red flag law signed by a former Republican governor in our state. And that is a massive issue because it creates a situation where a law-abiding citizen could be asleep in their bed and a SWAT team could knock down their door. And they wouldn't even know this has happened. They may not have even done anything wrong. It could be on a false report filed by a neighbor saying that this person's a threat for no good reason. So while open carry is now the law of the land in the state of Florida, and that marks a serious improvement to our gun rights here, there's still progress left to do. And what frustrates me personally as a Floridian is to see that our Republican supermajority here in the state legislature isn't doing the right thing. The Supreme Court already ruled years ago now on these issues, but the state legislature is sitting on their hands, and rather than doing the right thing, they're waiting for the court to force their hand. That means the citizens have their rights delayed, and that means that taxpayers are footing the bill for pointless legal arguments in courts all over things that the Supreme Court's already decided. If our legislature was up to the task of doing what they're supposed to do and protecting our rights, they would proactively edit our state laws to comply with Supreme Court decisions rather than wait for a court decision here in the state to affirm what the Supreme Court's already made clear.
Well, it is frustrating that we are a supermajority and we can't. I mean, we've got Second Amendment issues. I mean, it's shocking to me. Okay, so looking at our gubernatorial race, and you and I just recently attended a dinner with Congressman Byron Donalds. Is that on track still? Because we've got other people throwing their hat in the ring. Trump's endorsed him, and you were just in Tallahassee. What was the vibe over there when it came to Byron Donalds?
Well, interestingly, no one talked about the governor's race last night. It didn't even come up because it's still, I mean, it's a year away. In primaries, that's like 10 million years. No one thinks about primaries until February to April of the year they happen. So I don't think we're going to start really thinking about this primary for another 6 months, which is why it's a little strange anytime you see folks coming out, groups, anyone else, making endorsements in primaries because you don't even know who the field's going to be yet. Just recently, we saw the Republican Party of Florida endorse Ashley Moody to be the U.S. Senator. She'll be running to be elected to that position for the first time in 2026. We don't even know who's going to run against her, if anyone will. So it's a little premature to be making endorsements if we believe in a fair and open primary. She will probably win. It doesn't look like anyone's going to run against her, but still, it's a little strange when we have the official party position already locked in on one candidate.
Very true. And I know you and I have been frustrated by that because we want, the voters to choose during the primary. And I've said that for a few years now, too. So I did want to ask you about Charlie Kirk. Where were you and how do you see our future now that somebody that wasn't even an elected official gets snuffed out by, somebody it's a transgender um, agenda that they have, and it's so sad to me. And we've got here in the Panhandle, somebody did a memorial on one of the bridges. If the producer can flash that, it's so beautiful. And of course, right before their ceremony, somebody came and tried to deface it. Those lovely leftists. But how do you see us coming out of this Charlie Kirk moment in time?
I think we're all coming out of this a little bit discouraged. I know I am. I was shocked to see the news. I was actually flying my airplane just outside of DC. Autopilot was engaged, of course, but I was on the internet. I've got Starlink on the plane, and I was finding it out in real time that way. Initially it looked like it might be a hoax and it wasn't even true. Later it came out that it was true and that, things resulted the way they did, and we lost an American hero. We lost someone who was doing exactly the right thing. He said it a million times that it's important that we have conversations with those we disagree with, because if we stop having reasonable conversations, that's when violence picks up. If a republic can't disagree civilly, that's what creates the possibility of a civil war. And I think he was really standing in the gap and trying to do everything that a good patriot should do to stave off that violent possibility. So I'm discouraged is the best way to describe it, Veronica. I was
Mm,
saddened to see this happen. I hurt for the family that he left
I just
behind, but I hurt for America because where does that leave us as a people? I'm not sure that it's redeemable on some areas. I worry about that because I want to be an optimist. I believe in the republic. I believe in our constitutional foundation. But when we get to the point that we can't agree on basic constitutional framework anymore, I'm not sure there's anywhere to go from there.
Well, I final question. I know you're a busy, busy attorney. Can I look to see you soon in the Trump administration because you know how to deliver the message and you are an America First warrior, Keith?
They've got a lot of great people working hard every day in that administration, and I've spoken with them about a few positions, and I'll wait to see how any of those work out. I want to be in a position, if I take one, where I can make a serious impact. As long as someone else is up there and can do the job, by all means, Godspeed, let them do the job, because I like being down here in Florida rather than being up in DC.
Well, I want to thank Keith Gross for joining Veronica Live, and we'll be right back with my wingman.